Hey guys, my name is Haley, and today we're going to be filming what is essentially two tags that I wrapped up into one. I was going to do both of them, and then I didn't get my video out for Sunday like I was planning to, so I just combined them instead because they're both like 10, 12 questions apiece, and I just put them together. I don't know where they originated from. I found them from two other booktubers, and I don't think they even had the original creators tagged. I know tags are not like super popular on booktube anymore. They definitely were when I first started like 8 years ago. But I do think this time of year is a good time to be utilizing those because it's an easy way to like wrap up and give a lot of thoughts on books that I otherwise wouldn't be able to talk about if they were not in my favorites. To be fair, a lot of these are going to be in my favorites of the year, which will hopefully be up later this week. But yeah, I think I ended up with like 29 questions. So here we go. The first question is, what is your worst book of the year? And that by far was Beautiful Graves by LJ Shen. Me and LJ Shen, that'll be a question later. I did not like this book. I did finish it. It felt like watching a train wreck, but in the worst way possible. I have never despised like a main couple more in a book in my life, I don't think. So, definitely that one. Question number 2 is best audiobook. I decided to go with two different ones because they're very different genres. The first one being Craig DeLuise, episode 13. I highly recommend this audiobook if you have ever thought about reading this book. It is literally so fascinating with all the sound effects. It's like a full cast audio. It's a very weird horror book to begin with, so with all that additional content, it made for a great listening experience. Highly recommend. And then completely on the other end of the spectrum, I also wanted to say Lights Out by Navessa Allen. The people that said that you should listen to this on audio and it definitely adds to the humor, definitely agree. I loved this audiobook. Number 3 is Smuttiest Book of the Year. I honestly didn't read a lot of smut this year, I feel like. Lights Out could go here, but I decided to go with Halloween by Holly Wilde because, for one, this book was nothing but smut, but also it was so ridiculous that I was just like, I read it in my Reading Halloween books off of KU video that is one of the last couple videos on my channel if you scroll down. And it was just a bizarre fun time, but it was like decent smut. Like if you're looking for a lot of smut, it wasn't like good smut, but it was smut. Next question is most disappointing book of the year. I'm gonna go with A Soul to Heal by Opal Rain, simply because A Soul to what's it called? A Soul to Keep, the first book, was like literally my like top 3 favorite books of last year, even though I wasn't on booktube and I didn't get to talk about it very much. I adore that world and that series, and this book just simply had the trope that I just despise, and it put me off reading the rest of the series. I will probably go back to it because I love the world, and there was definitely some world building in this that I appreciated, but the actual relationship I could not have cared less about. It was so insta-lovey, and it was like my least favorite trope, which if you didn't know is the pregnancy trope, so I did not enjoy this. Next question is prettiest covers of the year. I have several. Number 1 being What the River Knows, simply because this edition that I have of it, which I think, is this the Illumicrate? No, it's the Fairy Loot. It's stunning. It has the beautiful sprayed edges, and I'm obsessed with it. So, definitely one of these. One of these. Definitely this one. And then I also wanted to mention my special edition of Godly Heathens. It's stunning. And then a new acquisition of mine, and that is the special edition of Her Soul to Take that just came out. That is by Harley LaRue, one of my favorite books I've read in the last several years. I believe I read it originally in 2020. And dust jackets. And the naked hardcover is beautiful. Like, it's so pretty. It was well worth the $20 and the pre-order that I did for this. Next up, as you might imagine, is your least favorite cover of the year, and that I'm honestly going to go with The Store, but I will preface this by saying this is on my top books of the year, and I'm glad that I picked it up, despite how horrific the cover is. Like, it would have been fine if it weren't for the creepy-ass eyeball, but I do not like this cover, but it is on my favorite books of the year, so stick around for me to talk about that. The next question is, what is the most emotional range in a book? And that was 3000% Gay the Prey Way by Natalie Naudus. This is the story of a girl who was in a Christian cult, and it hit way too close to home for me. It's also a sapphic romance. And I was an emotional mess the entire time I read this, and I loved it so much it will also be on my favorite books of the year that I'll talk about soon. Next up is the weirdest book that you read in 2024, and that is definitely Alison Rumfitt's Brainworms. If you asked me to tell you what happened in this book, I'm not sure that I could tell you, but I had a great time. I remember there were certain vivid scenes on audio that I was just sitting here like making faces at. But definitely Brainworms. It was one of the strangest books I've ever read. And then we have Best Romance of the Year, and that is 100% like Everyone and Their Mother, Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This is actually my first Abby Jimenez, and this also was very, very, very relatable to me because my partner is a travel nurse, and the main character is one too, and there is definitely some family trauma involved that hit a little too close to home for people that I know, so. Also, the man in this, the love interest, was perfect and I loved him. And then I have most random book of the year, and I'm gonna put a series. I'll just put the first one up, and that is the like Living Past series, but specifically the one I read was the Vikings. This is like a series of like 5 little short, like 100-page novellas of this sci-fi thing where you can go into Living Past, or I think there's another series that has the future. I don't know. There's 2 other like short novella series that I want to get to this year because these were so fun, and I've never heard anyone mention them. I don't know how I found them. They were on Kindle Unlimited. So I definitely recommend if you like sci-fi and want something very short, these are very fun. And then next question is best plot twists with no explanation because I can't tell you because it's a huge spoiler. This one, Godly Heathens, 100%. Next up, we have what was an underdog book for you, and I'm going to go with The Blueprint by Ray Gianna Rashad. This book has destroyed me, but also it took me a month to read, not for its own fault, but because I chose to read it like literally 2 days after the election happened. And it's a dystopian where women are owned and deals a lot with racism. So that was my bad for trying to read it after that. I couldn't do it, but this was definitely an underdog book because I've only ever heard one person recommend this, and they recommended it to me specifically. And I was like, yes. And it destroyed me. I also feel like that one is severely underhyped, so I'm excited to hype it up more in my favorite books of the year. Next up is what was an overhyped book? Honestly, I have 2 for me. One of which I DNF'd, which I will mention, and that is God of the Woods. I, for the life of me, could not care about this book. I read almost half of it on audio. I've also heard people say the audio is like the worst way to go because of all the switching timelines. I could not tell you who anyone in this was. As far as I gathered, it was about rich people and their secrets, which is just a trope I don't really like. This is marketed as a thriller. It's not a thriller. It's a literary fiction that has the slightest amount of thrilling in the fact that there are children missing, but that's literally it. I did not like this. But it's also on so many people's like favorite books of the year, and I'm very, very confused by this. And then another book I keep seeing on people's favorites of the years that deeply confuses me is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli. Is that her name? I read this. I thought it was the most average fantasy romance I've ever read. Like, I have read 700 other books exactly like this, and there are people that are like, this is my favorite book of the year, and I'm like, if this is somebody who's like brand new to fantasy, sure. That's how I feel about Fourth Wing. People are like, this is the best thing ever, or even ACOTAR, this is the best thing ever. If it's the first fantasy you've ever read, I'm sure it is. If you read a decent amount of fantasy, I don't understand. I did not get this one. I gave it like 2 stars, maybe 3. I don't think I will read the next book, but a lot of people seem to like this one. Next up, we have a book that surprised you. And I'm going to go with The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland, simply because I've tried to read Crystal Sutherland's other book like twice, and then I ended up getting rid of it and DNF'd it, and now I'm like curious if I need to go back and get it again because this is on my favorite books of the year, and I loved it. And it's spooky and paranormal, and that's all of my favorite stuff. So like, it's not surprising in the sense that it's not something I should have liked, because it definitely is, but it's more like this author was not an author I was interested in until now. And then we have your favorite book couple of the year. And I'm going to raise you couple and go with Polycule and go with everybody from the Losers Quartet. The Losers Duology by Harley LaRue. I love all of them. All 5 of them, all 4 of the guys, and Jessica. Love them so much. Definitely them. Next up, I'm going to choose a different one from the one I did on my, what was that? My mid-year book freakout tag. And I chose the main character from Godly Heathens in that one. So I'm going to go with a different one from that because technically they are still my favorite. But I'm going to go with Lilith from Lilith. I was like, what is this? By Nikki Marmory. And that is because I found this story so fascinating, seeing essentially the Bible told from the perspective of the creature person that had been created for Adam originally in the Garden of Eden, but she did not submit to Adam, and so God made him a new helpmeet. And then it follows her story, going through all of the centuries and all of the Bible stories from her perspective, and how women were robbed of our ability to be more important in society and more in charge and have more power. Loved our main character. Next up, we have new favorite author that you read this year. I have several. I'm going to mention, where I don't even know where I put the book. H.E. Edgman, which is the author of Godly Heathens duology as well as the Fae Keeper duology. They've definitely skyrocketed to my favorite author in general. And then I'm going to mention David Sodergren has been really, really fun as a new favorite horror author. He also writes really short books, like within 200 pages. In particular, I love The Har, but I also really liked Rotten Tommy, and I also really liked And By God's Hands You Shall Die. And then I'm also going to mention Nat Cassidy, which he wrote Mary, which you've heard me talk about and will hear me talk about more of my favorite books of the year, and Nestlings, which I also really enjoyed, and I'm very much looking forward to his other book that's coming out this year. I also really enjoyed, I don't own it yet, I really enjoyed Rest Stop. I've never read a book by him that I don't like. So, I'm very excited for all 3 of those new authors to keep up with. And then we have author that didn't work out for you this year. Thankfully, there weren't that many. But I will say LJ Shun. I don't think I will ever read anything else by LJ Shun. Every once in a while, I'll see a romance pop up and people talk about it, and I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. And I see LJ Shun, and I go, never mind. Beautiful Graves was that bad. I did not like it. So we have the happiest book, and hear me out. Girls Like Girls by Hayley Kiyoko. Not because this book is happy. This book is actually very, very sad for like the last 25% of it. Very depressing. But this, in general, the experience of reading this, I picked this up out of a little free library randomly. I had never heard anybody talk about this. Didn't know it was based on Hayley Kiyoko's song or her music video, which I think also got optioned for a movie. But the reason that it is the happiest for me is after the second I finished this book, I went to YouTube and watched all of Hayley Kiyoko's music videos, like in a night. And it made me like discover her music. She was someone I had heard of, especially on like the dating apps like a couple years ago, because people were always like, oh, I'm the cult, like my religion is Hayley Kiyoko, and I did not get the joke back then, and now I do. So I would say reading experience wise, this was one of the happiest for me. It was so fun. I'm also very excited for that adaptation. Then we had the saddest book, and the book that made me possibly cry the hardest, other than maybe Gay the Pray Away, was Stay Gold by Totally McSmith. I was a sobbing mess for the last like 30% of this book. It's so sad. It does eventually have a happy ending, but it was rough. And then we have most frustrating book, and for me that was War by Laura Thalassa, simply because, again, this is like a soul to keep. I loved Pestilence. I loved it so much, and for whatever reason, actually I know the reason, the fact that the main trope of this was the pregnancy trope drove me nuts, because I love the world. I love the apocalyptic setting. I love that there's these like creatures that can't die. I love the concept. But I cannot stand that trope. And it was like the 50% of this book was that. And I can't. I didn't enjoy. And then we have best book adaptation of the year. Like everyone and their mother, I loved Wicked. I've been a fan of the musical since I was in middle school, which was a very long time ago for me. And I adore the music. Top 10 show for sure. I read the book several years ago, but like I 100% want to reread it because I feel like the movie definitely pulled from both the musical and the book. And I feel like there's some things that I just don't remember reading. So I'm gonna reread these hopefully this year because I never read past the first book either, and I know there's 4 or 5 of them, so definitely wicked. Then we have A Book You Haven't Stopped Thinking About, and I'm gonna go with Slewfoot. This is probably my favorite witchy book of all time. I loved it so much, especially the fact that in this case it is like set back in Puritan times, so therefore the religious people are the enemy, and I love that in my religious horror books. Then we have Unpopular Book That You Loved, and I'm gonna go with The Night in Its Moon Quartet. For some reason, and I can't figure out why, if anybody knows where this controversy started, maybe share with me down below because I'm very confused and I've never seen anyone in my circles talk about it. But there are a ton of people who hate on Piper CJ online. And I picked up this series because I love her online content. So maybe I'm the weird one here. But there are people that hate her, and I don't know if it's just like stupid TikTok like book talk drama that I stay out of because I am not part of the book talk like barely at all. But I love this quartet so much. So apparently I'm in the minority there. We have Book You Thought You'd Love But Didn't. I'm going to go with Otherworldly by F.T. Lukens. I've been hearing about F.T. Lukens for years, and I assumed that I would like their books because they tended to be like fantasy or like sci-fi. I think they're all fantasy. I don't know. I have another one of their books that I'm going to try that I just got for free. So we'll see if Otherworldly was a fluke or not, but I also love this cover, and I it was fine. It was very much for somebody who had never read fantasy before, would probably enjoy it a lot more than I did, which is the case with several of these books as I'm realizing now, but yeah, was not a fan. And then we have Book with the Most Unique Concept. I want you to see if you can guess this. This is a book I talked about like all summer after I read it and talked to so many people in my life about it. And that is Dayspring by Anthony Oliveira. This is a book told in like verse and almost Bible passages and such. And it is about Jesus and the disciple whom he loved, John. And it is a romance between them, but also that is not the reason it is the most unique, although that is the only time I've ever seen that concept explored, and I need more of it. It's also because it's told in different timelines. Like some of it's in present days, some of it's literally in Bible days. A lot of it is like taking quotes directly from the Bible and talking about how people interpret them incorrectly. And I love the entire concept of this whole book. And I'm so happy I randomly found it in a used bookstore in Columbus. And then we have books you read this year that you would reread. Honestly, I will probably reread Dayspring. And probably Godly Heathens because I really want to annotate that duology. But I'm going to go with Dead Series by Vaughn Cassidy simply because these are some of the most fun books that I've read in a very long time. And I feel like if I ever needed like a feel good, like fun read to get out of a slump or something, I would probably reread these. These were so fun. Then we have books you wish you got to this year. And that's definitely all of my Don May. I am not getting them down, but I'll put up the first one that I want to read by MXTX, and that is The Scumvillain's Self-Saving System. I own all 4 of those. I own 2 of Heaven Official's Blessing, and I own 2 of the Demonic Cultivation series. And I want to get into Don May so bad. And I'm hoping this will be the year for it. And then the last question is books and authors you will prioritize in 2025. I have a whole stack of BIPOC authors that I've gotten and collected over the last couple of months that I've been thrifting, as well as queer authors, which I already read a lot of, but I've been collecting specifically a lot of BIPOC. I have some Kennedy Ryan, I have a couple historical fictions, which I'm going to attempt to get into. I have some Toni Morrison, I have Octavia Butler, and Sharon M. Draper. If you've heard of Sharon M. Draper, please tell me, because literally I thought she was so popular, and I realized that the reason my libraries in middle school had them all the time is because she's from Ohio. Which, if you didn't know, I live in Ohio. So I was like, that's why her books were always in schools, because she's a local author. And I didn't realize this until like a couple weeks ago. So yeah, I have like 3 Sharon M. Drapers. I'm really excited. I think I have, yeah, I was about to start one of them. I have Copper Sun. I read the Tears of a Tiger trilogy in middle school, and it like horrified me because it deals, all of her books, if you didn't know, deal with a lot of racism with like teens in particular. And those books have stuck with me through the years. I also just want to prioritize more nonfiction, which I've already started doing since November, since the election essentially. So we're already getting a good head start on that. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this. Let me know what you are looking forward to read, what genre you are most excited to get more into this year for 2025 in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.